I think we're live. The Note 8 is officially official. The hottest tech story of the week. The Pocketnow team is on the ground in New York City, and we're exhausted. But we're going to talk about the most iconic large-screen phablety phone in the history of large-screen phablety phones. You're already checking your watch. I'm Eddie Vetta. We've had our first taste of savory noteness, so we're going to share our first impressions, thoughts with you guys. So, yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Make sure you're charged and ready for episode 267 of the Pocketnow Weekly.
267, oh my God.
267, yeah. This weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile, smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the cool stuff you wish you had when you were a kid, and, you know, Star Trek, note-taking, computing devices. Where
I was just about to go, completely honest and say after, a few alcoholic beverages, you relax, you meditate, you still have to finish like a ton of work because we have a bunch of videos that are due in like 5 hours or something like that. And then we podcast.
Well, yeah, you got a podcast. That's not the whole point. So, recorded August 24th at midnight Eastern.
12:30.
Oh, yeah, 12:30.
You gotta have the half hour.
Pocketnow is live, reaxing the Galaxy Note 8.
Yeah, we are. Does it feel like reaxing something?
Reaxing. Yeah. The essential phone.
The essential.
We're gonna have a lot
That's
of
for competing podcasts, though.
Very, very shortly. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor of Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wan.
We're struggling to introduce each other.
And host of the Pocketnow Daily, Mr. Jaime Rivera.
Who's still editing it back there.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually hear his MacBook cranking over. You probably can't, given the quality of this live stream right now. But we're broadcasting off of a somewhat shaky Wi-Fi connection in our Airbnb. But we still had a lot that we wanted to discuss. I mean, again, we're going to have to talk a lot about note stuff. Real quick, though, I wanted to jump in before we get into the tech tomfoolery to thank this week's sponsor, and that's Dbrand. Dbrand makes a range of vinyl skins and wraps for laptops, iPhones, and all the latest smartphones, including Essential Phone.
This one really needs one, actually.
Including Essential Phone and the brand spanking new Galaxy Note 8, which we'll be discussing this week. Each skin is precision cut for a perfect fit on every device every time. There are a variety of different materials and finishes like marble, concrete, and a new green carbon fiber. And customers can mix and match colors and materials for each part of their device to fit their personality.
Although I do love their Black Dragon, though. That's the
Black Dragon is pretty sweet. That's the one. That's the one that I was most upset to pull off my Galaxy S8.
Don't remind me.
So I had my Galaxy S8. We put on the dragon skin one because we had a Dbrand sponsorship at the time, and it made holding that phone so much nicer. And so I was doing all the camera tests, rolling around in the dirt, afraid I was going to drop this slippery phone. But the other one that was a biggie for me, my Razer Blade laptop. The finish is super easy to scratch on that. I got a bunch of dings and nicks from IFA last year.
Yeah.
And so putting a skin on that was a handy and inexpensive way to preserve the look of my super expensive laptop.
They don't just do phones. They do laptops, too.
All kinds of devices. Dbrand is on it right now. So right now, every order over $20 gets free shipping anywhere in the world. A nice little perk. Get your hands on some cool new skins for your favorite piece of tech. Head on over to dbrand.com/weekly. That's dbrand.com/weekly. Let them know that we sent you, and we thank Dbrand for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly.
Indeed we do.
True story.
Right there.
And I need one for the Essential.
You need one for the Essential.
Yeah, I mean, actually, our sponsor, can you hook up an Essential and maybe a OnePlus 5?
Do you guys do screen protectors, maybe? Because I dropped mine on our Checkers run in New York just a few minutes ago.
Is it still alive?
It's still alive. Like, I'm amazed. But
well, would this be the third V phone that you would have killed? Is the fourth V phone?
No, don't get me started, dude.
So I mean, like these LG V phones are supposed to be like super durable and stuff.
But I mean, it's still
they're not Adam Dowd Jules proof.
They're not. They're not. Definitely not Adam Dowd.
That's the way.
Peace to Adam Dowd. Yes,
peace to Adam Dowd.
But peace to you for joining us. If you are joining us this late, I can't even read like how many viewers there are at this moment. But there have to be some.
Couple hundred. Yes.
Couple hundred. What? Oh my God,
that was some good podcasting right there. And he was like, huh?
No, see, well, not acting, but this is more.
Why don't we tell them how they can get in touch with us so that I'll pull up the hashtag and that way we can have a conversation.
And that hashtag.
Tell them about the hashtag.
I want to see the hashtag.
You're talking more about pulling up the hashtag than telling them that they can join the conversation on Twitter.
PN Weekly, hashtag PN Weekly on Twitter. Or
he's getting so defensive about this. He's like super sensitive.
No more beer for you, Jules.
Excited. And that had less alcohol than your drinks.
Wow, so he's super lightweight, is what he's saying right now.
I had less alcohol and now I'm really sensitive. Where are we getting here? Podcast@pocketnow.com. Also the place to email your questions so that we can save them for a later date, for a rainy day maybe, and answer them to your complete willfulness, leisure, what's the satisfaction? That's the word I'm looking for.
So we already have a great question from @FatProduce, a regular viewer of the show. How much charge do you three have this late into the evening? Hashtag PN Weekly.
Essential phone is
I'm impressed.
On 42%.
Yeah.
And I
pulled it off the charger.
I pulled it off the charger at 6 a.m.
That's
what do you got on your V20?
So I'm on my second. I have a spare battery, so I just keep charging. That's the state of me, and right now I'm on 34%.
Okay, 34% on the second battery.
On the second battery of the day. No, this is the third charge cycle of the day.
Oh, okay, so I'm doing better than the third charge.
Yeah. And so Galaxy S8 Active is on 61%.
Well, that's cheating though, because it's the Active, the best phone in Samsung's lineup.
You're not using those phones equally, though.
This is the second charge.
Oh, well, but you were using it as the hotspot.
I was using it as the show. So by the way,
so that's impressive though. For it to last in that kind of cell bombarded
we were there 3 hours
and actually running data that whole time because you kept all our notes going for the entire show. So I'm actually not going to hate on Samsung there. That's impressive.
Fair points.
So
there's no hate on this phone.
So I'm at 41% on my LG G6, but I did have 15% top off at the bar.
Okay.
So I would be down closer to like danger battery, low battery warnings.
That is the best performance on the G6 ever. Like for me,
it's not bad.
For me, the G6 is not good.
No, it's not. But I've been using the Honor 9 as my camera.
Oh my God!
And so, with the exception of doing a couple wide-angle shots, most of my phone photos have come from a different phone, and that's usually where I've got my screen up the whole time.
I know, listeners. I'm sorry. The webcam is crap, but you gotta at least take a second, pull it out, because they have to see the finish on this thing.
The finish on
the Honor 9.
Oh, it's in my bedroom.
Oh, it's in
so you guys talk real quick. I'll be right back.
Because I handled the pre-brief on Honor 9, and I was kind of I was kind of disappointed to hear that kind of first quarter. But I'm the rumors are that AT&T wants to do a little thing with Huawei. That same time period. So
I think AT&T would be dumb not to do something with Huawei.
I mean, this has been
particularly that Honor 9 was actually a unit that took us a while to get it. I was actually wanting to get it for myself.
Look at the non-deletion and all that.
And then there was just no way I could get it. I had to go to
Hawaii. It's amazing.
But it's a gorgeous phone.
It is.
No, it really is a pretty phone. No, I feel it's a little Galaxy S7-y.
No. That phone is like a complete hybrid.
Well,
it's the back.
It's the 15-layer laser thing.
Okay, so it's
the frame is very S7-y. The glass is wholly unique Honor.
So the back is a complete Galaxy S7 Edge. The bottom is Galaxy S7 Edge. The top is a Galaxy S6 Edge.
Yeah.
And then the front is a mix between iPhone 7 and OnePlus 5.
I mean, there's still some Samsung going on there too.
There's a little Samsung.
I feel Samsung was the predominant influence over this phone, and not necessarily in a bad way because it's blending a lot of the things. But the thing that I'm still consistently impressed with, and this is something that I think we have a little disagreement with on the Note 4, and we'll get to the Note 4 here in just a minute. I promise we won't keep rambling about this. Is the flush camera sensors where the glass is unbroken on the back of the Honor is still, I think, one of the most impressive things I've seen on a phone. I mean, it's just so simple.
Dude, Huawei,
it's so
I remember the first time I ever used the Huawei, which was the Nexus 6P.
Yeah.
And it was just funny because remember back in Latin America, our concept of Huawei's is these very cheap phones.
Oh
yeah.
And so, like, to get a 6P for me, I was like, made by Huawei, like, really? But there's a Huawei before the 6P. There's a Huawei after the 6P. That 6P continues to be one of my favorite phones of all time.
Any manufacturer,
for many reasons. And it just made me start believing in this company. And, like, I received the Honor 8 late.
Yeah.
Then I received the P10. Then the Mate 9, then the P10. And just my exposure to Huawei hardware.
Yeah.
Like, the taste. I love how... I remember when I used to go to Huawei presentations 5 years ago, and it was always... The CEO was always like, this is better than this over competition. This is better than this over competition. And now Huawei is not trying to compete.
No.
I think
Huawei is being Huawei.
Well,
they started entering the U.S. market, and they've tempered themselves down.
Well, I feel like the U.S. market is still the last nut that they've got some inconsistencies in how they're trying to crack it. But when worldwide, they're the number 3.
Yes.
That's impressive growth because, like you, prior to the Nexus 6P, this is a brand that was not on my radar.
No, zero.
And how quickly we've seen them change that perception to now I'm genuinely looking forward to new products that they put out.
You know what the funny part is, and I think this is going to serve as a good segue.
Yes.
Before Samsung started doing Nexus devices, Samsung was really not as much in our radar either.
Yeah. Remember, HTC was the big bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was the carryover from the Windows phone, Windows Mobile.
And then HTC made the first Android phones.
Yeah.
Single UI.
And then Samsung did the Nexus S. And then the Galaxy Nexus, which was my first ever. The Nexus 1 was my first Android phone. And then it was the Galaxy Nexus.
Yeah. And well, the Galaxy Nexus was the one that really sort of, I think, blew open Samsung design.
Yeah.
My wife was a huge fan.
It was the first 720p display.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I remember holding that phone back in the day. I still have it. I have the unit there in my drawer. And I was like, this phone is so big. It's so hard to manage. And now we handle the Galaxy Note 8.
Yeah.
Who could possibly use a 4.7-inch screen as their daily driver?
720p is over.
Crazy. Who could use all of those dots with HD resolution?
Oh, you remember that screen was Pentile?
Yeah.
We used to criticize Pentile.
I mean, I still do. I mean, that's one of the things I was actually hoping to see Samsung address. We should jump in on that.
Yeah. So I think a good place to start would be Juan Salazar on Twitter. Does the Note 8 feel more like a revolution or an evolution, which is always a good place to start?
I defer to you.
Iteration.
Iteration.
Yeah.
It's an iteration. I wouldn't use any of those words. It's
It's something that needed to be in the place of the Note 7.
I understand the reason why. I understand why Samsung is doing this. They had a rough year last year.
Yeah.
I found it to be bold for the company to stand in a presentation where they're supposed to praise their new product, and they took the time during the presentation to admit that they disappointed.
That they had a rough year,
And they used the words, when we disappointed you.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, ever since DJ Co has taken over the company, oh my God, like, I love the humbleness of...
Well, Samsung has been so much more grounded in their conversation.
Yes.
And we don't have the same hijinky, let's do a Broadway show to announce a phone kinds of shenanigans. And I think we all appreciate that kind of a conversation, a more grown-up conversation when it comes
there was still the spec baiting when you headed into the S5 because we were kind of transitioning into a whole bunch of things too, with Quad HD, with a potential 4K chip of the 805, Snapdragon 805. And then we started gliding into refinements, S6, design, smooth, like glass couple. It's not really like, you wouldn't think of it as an S3 really, right? Like they had a nature like thing where this is like a more industrial.
Well, and the whistle, the iconic Samsung whistle. Now, getting back to the Note 8 though,
the cringy whistle.
The press conference, because I loved that moment where they actually, and they were pulling video. I'm sure a lot of you probably saw Samsung's
even
press
Flossie
conference.
Carter was there
and pulling video of people talking about like their experiences and just like how emotional this stuff gets. And we might want to be kind of cynical about something like that, but this is probably the device you spend most of your day interacting with other people. This is like your lifeline to other communication. Yes. I think it's important to recognize like how many people they left in the lurch. The flip side to that, though, is I think they went a little overboard on the fan service. All you loyal Note people, you're the fans that kept us afloat, the warm, fuzzy, good feels. And you're like, I understand balancing that conversation and being appreciative of your customer base. But after a point, it was getting a little much for me in the whole, like,
well, I told you
we're besties. Samsung and you and keeping us and love dub.
I told you I got invited to that fan thing.
Oh, no.
So, fun fact, I actually received an email from Samsung. Bear in mind, I've been using the Galaxy Note since version 2.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that they had some way to track my personal user and notice that I've had every single
Samsung and the NSA, they're all up in your stuff right now.
I don't know.
Use that S Pen.
I don't know. It's just so I received the invite to come to Unpacked as a fan, and they had like this stack of it was a very big group of people that were there. I think that like half the people that were there were media, and then the other half were people that were invited by Samsung. I think it was a good move. I don't take it the wrong way. I feel that the reaction to the Note, because they made a good point. I mean, this company is like, okay, let's like bow down, accept defeat, and let's offer people whatever they want.
And let's see if we can snatch a victory out of the jaws of this defeat. And
but if you think about it, when this happened to Samsung at the beginning of the Note 7 problem, it wasn't like we are going to replace your phone with another Samsung. No. We will replace your phone with whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so for the company to notice that people replace their phones with another Samsung, I remember that the metric was like 91%.
Yeah, there was almost no migration.
No migration to the competition. And so I feel that it was a good move to praise loyalty.
I understand that, but I start to get a little twitchy when some of this starts to become like we're besties and we're your friends, and the conversation starts drifting into that kind of feel.
I get it.
You know, it's because it's like at the end of the day, this is still a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation whose main responsibility is to their shareholders to generate value. And that's just why I kind of feel it gets a little much, or got a little saccharine for me during that conversation. I wanted them to get on to talk about the Note 8, which we're not even doing because we're talking about the press conference.
I mean, it's not even the press conference.
I think to end, and I like the way they ended that whole fan thing, where it was like, dude, the only reason why the LG V20 won our prize for the best phone of 2016 was
by default.
Was because the Note died.
Yeah.
But I think we were all in agreement that the Galaxy Note 7 was the best phone of 2016.
Not for me, but for other people.
The general consumer. So I feel like Samsung has made a very dedicated conversation with its fandom. It's realized what it's done, and it, in handling the recall situation, it rebounded by doing this whole repackaging the Note Fan Edition, and in the guise of that was going to resource these parts for just making up the loss, and it wouldn't make anywhere near the amount of money that they would have otherwise. I feel like that was more of a ploy. They're doing it in developed countries where it can be debated that there's some fandom to agree over there, but it's also kind of a mid-range, just as a general mid-range device with a phablet and stylus, and that putting the Note FE out there was signaling to them that we're doing this as a token, we're doing this as a way to let you know that we are making sure that the checks are in balance, and that when we get to the Note 8, because they've started offering $425 rebates to Galaxy Note 7 owners for the Note 8. We're going to do it right, and we're going to make sure that everything's polished up by the time this all blows through. So I feel like that is the foundation of where that section of the audience is coming from. Do you think where we're going here is like, where's the mass general audience here, and what's the split? What do you think?
Well, that's what I think we have yet to see. I think the S8 was the proper Samsung response to getting people back in line, not making jokes about Samsung phones exploding. And so now I think we still need to see
people still
the Note name.
No.
It's an S name. The Note name.
It's not that the S8 was the completion of that conversation. The S8 was just to show we're back on track. We're making boundary pushing devices, literally, and that starts you back on the road towards changing over that knee jerk reaction. Samsung's going to blow up. Like it takes time to undo that. I still think we'll need to see over the next 2 fiscal quarters how much damage was really done to the Note name.
Well, dude,
I don't think it was going to be much. I don't think we're going to see a significant drop off.
Well, the problem is we're not going to get the numbers. Remember, Samsung is one of the companies that does not release.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got some pretty good insight on how S8 sold after that. And again, we're never going to get the full picture, but I think it'll take.
S8 has been remember, Samsung wasn't making money, making profit since the S4. So this is just proof.
I know, but we've still got general trend data on how many S8s have been shipped, how many S8s have been stocked, and we can get a pretty good sense of, once we start seeing that kind of data for the Note, if there was a significant lasting impact to the Note brand from last year. Well, I'm assuming we're going to see that kind of dip in light of the end of this year. Because the Note no longer stands as the sole big screen device. We're going to have the most exciting hardware update that we've ever seen from Apple. We're going to see something, I think we're going to see something pretty cool from LG. And internationally, you've got intense pressure now from Huawei. The Mate has never been stronger. And Pixel 2 is starting to take that enthusiast conversation. Mm-hmm. The people who really cared about that Nexus kind of software update conversation. Those people have no interest in an LG or Samsung. They're looking at something Google Direct. And so I think this is probably going to be the toughest competition, while Samsung's still licking their wounds on what used to be the only big screen in town.
But I don't think that's going to be the biggest deterrent of the Note 8. Honestly, it's not competition.
So what's the big drag then?
I want to ask you to try to
do. He likes to play this game.
Try to make some memory and remember, when was the last time that you ever heard a phone in its entry tier? This is this is the cheapest version of this particular phone that you can buy, and it being retailed at $960.
Verizon, good credits. Then you spread that over 24 months or an 18 months.
Dilute it.
That's what you do.
He just went crazy. Larry on
it's nearly $50.
That's hilarious.
$40 a month, and there's
it's nearly $50.
Or down payments.
Okay. So the
credit market for these.
The point being is, never has a phone been this expensive. And the reason why I'm saying entry tier is because I didn't even know that there's going to be a United States. Here's the thing: if you go for a 256 gig iPhone, it costs $1,100. An iPhone 7 Plus. So you can make an iPhone 7 Plus that expensive, but you don't have to.
Model, right? Yeah.
But you don't have to.
I get you on that.
But for the base model of the Note 8 to cost between $920 and $960, it just reminds me of that time when Steve Ballmer, with the launch of the iPhone, nobody had ever paid $500 for an iPhone plus the subsidy, which was the launch of the first iPhone.
Yeah. No, I feel, though, that we have crested into this territory because how expensive was the Note 7?
800 something. 850.
I mean, we were talking an almost $900 device last year.
Yeah.
So the Note has always played in this top tier premium.
It was less expensive.
Every phone was less expensive comparatively.
But it was a ladder step. It was a ladder step. The first thing was the iPhone 7 Plus and that $20 increase between $749 and $769.
But that's kind of what I'm getting at, is we're going from Note 7 to Note 8. We're not going from Galaxy S8 small phone to
$200.
In the case of the Galaxy Note 5 versus S6 Edge Plus, The Note 5 was $50 cheaper.
Right.
It was $750. It was $750, and the SXS Plus was $100. It was $850. That was like the old, true.
Right. And what was it that they were selling? They were selling a fashion phone with one of the first curved screens on a phone that large.
That was a beautiful phone.
I mean, it was a pretty phone. But again, what we're talking about are different scenarios. So I'm saying from model year to model year, Samsung already set a $900 expectation near the Note 7. And we're talking like unlocked $30 more than that now. So I feel price is going to put a hurt on this, but I also think this is the next phase of what the premium flagship tier is going to represent. And I think that $1,000 ceiling, this now gives Apple, I mean, what's crazy is that fact that Samsung did not price this at $999 gives Apple room to actually hit that price point, make it an exclusive luxury device, badge it and bill it that way, and make it a completely emotional purchase, kind of like an Apple Watch edition, right? You know, you can now make that a part of the conversation, that it represents some kind of status where phones haven't done that for a really long time.
I'm going to I really don't like the premise that Samsung is giving room to Apple in order to make the room.
You just gave me an idea right now.
What's that?
So remember that the iPhone 7s, iPhone 7s Plus, and iPhone 8 are rumored to be glass and stainless steel.
Yeah.
What if it's ceramic instead of glass?
We heard rumors that Apple was working on a material.
I mean, ceramic is what they used on the Apple Watch edition.
Yep. Ceramic on your Essential phone.
Yeah. And like, what's the cool thing about ceramic? It doesn't scratch.
Yeah.
Like this band that I got for the Gear S3 is ceramic. It doesn't scratch.
Yeah.
So what if that's the reason why they're going to price the phone so expensive?
Well, I mean, as long as there's a reason. I mean, I know there are things on Essential phone that spec junkies are probably not going to really like, right? Or, you know, what I think is also funny, like 2 years ago, it was kind of a novelty if a phone was water resistant. Now it's like, oh, phone's not water resistant.
Why is it not
End of conversation.
Exactly.
You know? And I think that's kind of funny to watch how that kind of stuff cycles.
Yeah.
You know, where you don't need it until suddenly a phone that you like has it. And now it's a total deal breaker if a different phone doesn't have that feature. When we can't say there is no other phone that's made out of ceramic and titanium.
For me, it's a deal breaker. Not having water resistance.
I don't know that it's a deal. I mean, like, that's just it. I mean, for me personally, I like good drop resistance and durability. Water resistance is nice. You know, so why the V20 was still a solid option for me, even lacking water resistance. Still would have liked the V34. Yeah, to get both, but you have to seal up the battery, and I understand those compromises too. I can still look at the Essential and say, there is a reason you pay more for more expensive manufacturing and premium build. So it's not like, you know, it's just outright a deal breaker. It's you just have to find the right audience member for that.
That was a $700 phone. We're talking about $1,000. Where's the $300 gap here? I'm not seeing it. I don't see
between
Essential. It's the 3D sensing. It's the iris scanning. It's all those things.
I guess that's the reason why I wanted to segue into the topic. I guess the biggest question, which is actually the question of the day for this daily, whenever it goes live, is the Galaxy Note 8 really worth $960? Mr. Juan Bagnell has tested the OnePlus 5, who's currently with the Honor 9.
Right.
I mean, what do you think, man?
So to me, I always think that the question of worth is toxic because there is an audience for every device. I have to find who that audience is. The audience might be 3 people in Poughkeepsie, and that device is a failure. But you want to match. Like that phone could be the absolute right perfect fit for that one person. That's always the quest that I'm trying to find. So we're looking at a Note, which is $930 plus. I can't justify that for a lot of people in my circle of family and friends.
Sure, same here.
Right? So I have difficulty there. But there are a couple things. If you're really into stylus, fine point, fine touch, you know, interaction and navigation, it's literally the best game, the only game in town for the implementation of that feature.
If you're looking for it on a phone, yes.
This is the first proper Samsung with a dual camera sensor. So if you want the novelty of having a zoom sensor portrait mode, you're into that kind of fun photography on the go, what other Samsung is going to do it for you?
If you were a consumer, would you buy it?
I say that the
basis. I wouldn't, because, I mean, personally, if you're asking me, I wouldn't, because I like content creation devices like the V20. Yeah. And that's a phone that is much better able for me to get my work done.
So you would love a V30 with an S Pen.
Well, what I use my V20 with a stylo pen.
True.
I use my phablety phone with a fine tipped active stylus. It just doesn't have nearly the kind of software interaction that I want from a Note. Yeah. So again, I can't write off this notion of price, because also a part of this is that Samsung is the only manufacturer which has nearly as successfully as Apple, become a lifestyle brand.
True.
So the Note also becomes a status symbol. And I don't want to dismiss that for people. There are people walking around, and you go to an airport and you see some dude walking around with a Louis Vuitton duffel bag, and you're like, you spent way too much to put crap in a bag, but that's his gig. That's his style. That's what he wants.
That's a status based on exclusivity, do you think?
What do you think?
So few phones out there have styluses that offer styluses. I mean, you're talking about the G Stylo or Stylus 3 or whatever from LG, and those are, more affordable, less functional. And when you're talking about the software suite that Samsung has developed around it, that takes a lot of effort to maintain.
If the conversation is style, then the S Pen's irrelevant. Because if the conversation is status,
it would have ended up in the SA
Plus. It's an exclusive.
And right now the SA Plus is a BOGO deal on T-Mobile, right? So like, but you can't have status if you're buying a phone today and it's the SA Plus. You have status today if you buy it.
But that's not the argument I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to is that it's an exclusive feature which people are willing to pay more for. In which case, why don't you treat it as an aspirational purchase where you save up for?
I think they do.
I don't know, man.
I mean, a big part of that is what is their social networking surface? Pen something?
Pen
up. So I mean, they do treat that feature as like, be an artist and be creative and be fun and be free and buy our $1,000 phone.
Listen, so it would be I don't know what the trend is, but I did note it. Like, for example, my ex-wife went crazy over the Galaxy Note 2. Mm-hmm. Not because it was a Galaxy, not because it had a pen, just because the phone was big.
Yeah.
And I have seen...
we know there's so much data to say that people were using the Note more for the screen.
I know an insane amount of women particularly that prefer the iPhone 7 Plus just because it's big.
Well, I mean, but think about that. That actually makes a lot of sense, because what do you not carry around that you can put larger devices into?
In the case of a woman, they have a purse.
They have a purse, yes. Right? I mean, so what's funny is that there was like this really good data right before the launch of the iPhone SE about the popularity of the iPhone 5S with men. Yeah. Especially younger men who were, they didn't have the purchasing power to buy overpriced gadgets, but then two, it's like we were in another phase of like skinny jeans.
Yes.
I mean, again, as fashion and status, they wanted the Apple logo, but they didn't want something that would bend in a pocket. And so the iPhone 6 was actually out of the question because they hadn't fixed the rails on the volume rocker. Yeah. Not specifically because of that, but there was the whole bend.
The burst of jerry rig, everything.
That. Yeah, exactly. Good job, Zach.
Good job,
pointing us in the right direction.
Love you, Mr. Nelson.
But that became like this pocket trend for a hot, hot minute where people wanted these tiny phones to complement their personal style. I feel the Note still fits that conversation, but I feel its power is waning, largely because what you're talking about. Big screen phones are no longer unique. It's no longer a novelty.
The thing is, and let's go back to the reason. So why did my ex-wife want a Note? Bear in mind, my job was to review phones. It still is. And, I was like, oh, my God, like the battery on this thing is...
There are a whole bunch of other reasons that go hand in hand, but I think people still look at a big screen or something that's a bit larger in the hand.
True. But for me, it wasn't that. For me, it was actually cumbersome to use a Note 2.
Yeah.
For me, it was just going on whatever trade show I went to and not have to worry about charging the phone.
Yeah.
And if anything, I carried a spare battery and I would just replace it.
Yeah.
And so
Instant 100%.
Going back to the whole concept of
you gotta boot it up.
Going back to the whole concept of our discussion the other day, our tech debate over if the Note was productive or not. I was like, okay, so what is this product trying to replace? It's trying to replace a notepad, which is what I say in my hands-on of the Note 8. Okay, this product is trying to replace a notepad. It's trying to replace
or a sketchpad.
What are the characteristics of these things? Like, for example, what things?
Paper never runs out of battery.
Okay, let me give you an example of the perfect replacement for paper: a Kindle.
Well, but you can't draw.
You can't. No. The perfect replacement for paper, for a book.
Okay.
Like, what product does a perfect job of replacing the product that's trying to replace? A Kindle.
Yeah.
You charge it once a month.
Yeah.
You can use it every day and charge it once a month. It completes its purpose. And it actually looks like if you're reading paper. Right. So in the case of the Note, let's forget about the whole concept of reading paper or not. It's trying to be this tool, this notepad that's always available to you. That whenever you just remember a photo, somebody gave you a phone number at 9 p.m. and you're like, you just jot down, you just pull the note. Okay, can the Note truly achieve that is the question.
Well, but that's also, I think, part of the misnomer is we are still judging the Note on this one feature of S Pen, as opposed to it being Samsung is the everything in the kitchen sink kind of company. So Samsung is trying to add a feature to a crazy Swiss Army knife gadget.
Yes.
They're not focusing on just, so I mean, like so to your point, something like the BlackBerry is the longevity device.
And
it features a hardware keyboard. Those two pieces define BlackBerry.
That's a longevity feature.
But what can you do on a BlackBerry for a creative professional or a multimedia content creator or a sketch artist?
I'll give you an example.
So you can have all the battery life in the world, but can you doodle on it?
So I'll give you an example. Angela, you met Angela today. Angela's a good friend. Her husband, Dom, is an amazing cartoonist. And the moment the iPad Pro with Apple Pencil came out, it was no room for discussion. And I'm like, so what is it that you like about the iPad Pro so much? He's like, so have you ever used the Wacom
Wacom
pad?
Like Adam Lane is all about.
And I'm like, no, okay, so let's just say that the Wacom is like driving an old Chevy from the 80s. It gets the job done.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. But then you move to the Apple Pencil, and it's like if they sat a cartoonist or drawer and they asked them exactly what they wanted, and it got delivered on the iPad Pro. And so, and this is the reason why I've always said, like, I remember back in the day of Pocket PCs, these were products I didn't have to worry about the battery ever dying, so they were perfect notepads for me.
Okay.
Things like that. And so iPads last for 10 hours. Of permanent use.
Right, but what are the trade-offs there? Because you know we have to examine the compromises on.
Obviously,
you just throw your iPad in your back pocket, right?
Obviously, and they tried the iPad Mini and it failed.
Right,
and they haven't.
And they never even bothered with pen support.
No,
Mini.
exactly.
It was so terrible.
And so it's like I've always felt that about the Note. I always felt that it would have been an amazing tablet. They came out with the Note 8.0.
Yeah,
it failed. They're trying to go back into the tablet space with the S Pen. And so, I'm like, okay, isn't there a way for the Note to just go back to what it was? What was it? It was, again, the Vanguard phone, and I stole that word from you.
Yeah.
It was that product that you had the battery life. So the Note 2 and the Note 3.
In 1 year, the Note would feel like it was a whole generation ahead.
Exactly. Because it actually did achieve its purpose.
Right.
It had amazing battery life, and it also had the pen.
Yeah.
So that is the main reason why ever since the Note 2, that was always my Android phone.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because it was a good phone. I felt that it was a terrible phone. It was too big and too cumbersome, and it was too flimsy and all you want. But I love being able to pull the damn pen out and actually use it. But then ever since I started using the Note 5, ever since the Note Edge, actually, which I never used the Note 4. So I
was a Note 4 fanatic. The Note 5 is where we saw Samsung shift and
back.
Yeah. And it was all about trying to create that pretty first functionality second. So I don't disagree with you there, but I still feel that what Samsung is trying to tell us in the way that they're producing gadgets is this is what has been selling their phones. So for people like us that, I mean, the fans, because that's what we are. I mean, we're totally besties with all of these multi-billion-dollar companies. Yeah. So when we tend to rationally look at the sort of comparative specs and we make our decisions, I mean, we're still appealing emotionally and justifying with rationale after the fact. Yeah. We have different criteria for what get us emotionally lit up about different devices. Now, when we're looking at the way that Samsung is saying these are the features that are moving products and that are making people excited, and that they're not playing quite the same thin game as like a Motorola is trying to do right now, and I don't think they're being very successful with the Z2. But it's the same thing, actually that's a perfect example. So the Moto Z Force, Moto Z2 Force, according to Android enthusiasts, the killer feature of the Moto Z was the bigger battery. According to Motorola, the killer feature of a Force is the shatter shield screen. So if they had called the Moto Z2 Force just the Moto Z2 and left off the name Force, no one would have been cranky. All it would have been is an update to the thin phone that we had. Oh, and they added the shatter shield screen to the thin phone. Yeah, that's an upgrade. But because they called it Force, everyone was focused on the battery, and that's why people got upset. And so I think something similar has happened with Samsung.
Bear in mind, the Force has been the iteration of the Max. Yeah, there was always the Razor, the Razor Max. The Razor,
the big one, the thick one. Yeah,
would you count the Turbo? Because I think there's some.
Yeah, but I get your point.
That one, 5 letters tanked the perception of the Moto Z2 Force.
You have an amazing point. True.
And true. In a very general way, I kind of feel something similar has happened with Samsung. When you call something a Note, we had an expectation of removable batteries, business grade durability, extended battery life because of the larger frame. Yeah. That's not what Samsung thinks a Note is. Samsung thinks a Note is
whatever is
an S8 Plus with an S Pen.
Well, whatever is convenient for the market
ever since the Note 5. True.
And I think that we're all debating the je ne sais quoi of a freaking smartphone for that.
I mean, it's kind of the point of this podcast.
Well, yeah, but the time period. It's not a we're not in a vacuum, though. I think when you're
this week is a vacuum of note coverage, though. But we're all getting sucked in.
It's fine. That bandage.
I'm just glad I can move on in the party.
You don't want to talk about the bandage.
Talk about the Note. Just let it go. Just let it go. And V30 rumors. And iPhone rumors.
S5, S5 middling sales. S4 had middling sales too. So this was the recovery. The pretty first thing was actually a response to we need pretty phones because that's what's apparently going to fix us. So I mean, every single point, they're trying to fix something when it comes to sales.
Well, but almost every company does this thing where they have to pivot. You can court the geeks and the enthusiasts to a degree, and then after a point, you've got to find a way to go mass market. And I think the S6 was their imperfect way to pivot to become a little bit more lifestyle-y like Apple was, and then I think they've evolved and they've improved from there. The S7 was a great year for Samsung. It was a great year for phones.
I'm even sure that the Note 5 was like this experiment.
Well, it totally was.
I'm sure that the Note 5 was an experiment and it worked.
The S6, the S6 Edge, the S6 Edge Plus, and the Note 5, they did not know. And look at the regions where they would sell an S6 Edge Plus and not a Note.
And by the way, Samsung, the reason why your Note 4 failed is not because the phone was bad. Wait, no, it's not because the idea of the phone was bad. It was because the phone was clunky AF.
Note 4 is quite possibly one of the best phones ever made. True story. Future tech debate. Because what I want to circle back to, though, is talk about some of this, because we had actually a really great drive. Because it's almost 1 in the morning. It is 1 in the morning. It's after 1 in the morning.
What time? Oh my god!
We had this great conversation talking about design.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've been really impressed with on the Honor 9 how flush the glass is completely unbroken from the back of the phone to the camera sensor. Yes. And I was a little disappointed with the camera module bar on the Note 8 after the wonderful work that's been done on the S8.
I like it.
It's black. It's like the black rounded rectangle in a sea of either black or your choice of deep sea blue, maple gold.
Because I steamrollered over you in the car. I would actually like to hear why does that stand out for you as a design accent?
Okay, so I like composition when I take photos, for example, and so I hate the fact that in the S8 and S8 Plus, even though they were trying to look for symmetry and that fingerprint scanner.
Oh no, I hate that. Yeah.
Okay, it's completely asymmetrical. It's like it's not aligned with anything, and so for me, it's like completely unpleasant to look at the phone from its back. Which is hilarious because it's completely symmetrical from the front.
Yeah.
With and then when I grab the S8 Active, like the top bezels are larger than the small, lower bezel. Those things make me cringe. I admit I have that problem. And so what I like about the Note is not necessarily. I hate the fact that the fingerprint scanner's there on the side. I hate the fact that they couldn't be smarter about it. But I feel that the design is symmetrical. It's just it actually.
So it's basically
it's pleasant to see.
They hung the frame straight.
Yes.
Okay. That I can appreciate because again I'm looking at this more from the thickness because it's the thing that has consistently impressed me from the S6 to the S8 was they've gone thinner. They went thinner on the phone, and then you have this lump of a camera that stuck out on the S6, and that was one of the only phones that I ever damaged the camera glass because it stuck out so far. You couldn't put that phone down without resting on that camera sensor. You get to the S8, and Samsung's finally sunk this sensor where it's near
flush. The S7.
The S7 still has that kind of guard that pops out from the back. I mean, the S8. I mean, you can run your thumb across and only feel that little bit of a seam. From where the module is housed and how that's blended with the rest of the phone, I just thought was such a great mechanical achievement, engineering achievement, that then the Note 8 is calling attention to the fact that there's this separate module. And to me, that makes it look like it stands out. But I can totally see your point where,
let me ask you this,
having that bar at least sort of frames
with the exception of Huawei phones, every other dual camera smartphone has a terrible implementation. Either the iPhone 7, fine. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I agree.
That's
I'm going to agree with that.
He's like, I'm literally holding it right now.
I'm going to agree with that one.
Let's reset and base this around a question.
Hold on. Oh my God. The iPhone 7 Plus. Is ridiculous.
I hate that visor bulge that sticks out.
Ridiculous.
It's really bad.
I'm like, really, Johnny?
It's really bad. Well,
it's really bad.
And it makes me a little nervous for the renders that we've seen that all they've done is rotated it 90 degrees.
Oh my God.
Because
that wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't the orientation. The problem was the fact that it sticks out like crazy. But so we got to...
No. I just wanted to center this around a question because we want to get people involved. #PN Weekly people. Hello. From Andrew Wallace, it seems that Samsung is chasing Apple with the zoom camera instead of going with a wide angle or monochrome and color sensor.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
So let's go. Is it like 28 millimeters for the Apple, and then it's a 2 times, and then it's the same, but only for 26 millimeters?
Okay, so
I don't. But they're approximately the same.
The telephoto, yes. You're never going to use it. Nope, you're never going to use it. I've been in baseball games and I don't use it. Like that S.
He's not going to use it so hard. I'm going to get some more water.
But go do it. But okay, the implementation of portrait is actually
pretty good. Yeah.
So okay, so why don't I use portrait on the iPhone? Number one, because
no control over it.
No control over it. And you can't really predict how close or far you have to be from the subject. And so the moment you switch to portrait mode, you have to, normally you're like this because you're used to the 27 millimeter distance. And then it's like, oh my God, you're so close. So you have to move back. And so like it automatically deters that. haven't you gone through that experience where you see something at the moment and you want to capture it, but you want to capture what you see?
Yeah.
You know, and then when you pull the phone out and the phone is not depicting what you see, it feels so disappointing.
Yeah, it feels really claustrophobic.
Which is the reason why the G6 is so important. The G6 is one of those phones that actually portrays what you're seeing with the wide-angle lens.
Giving you that field of view.
And giving you that field of view that the human eye sees. And so I love the fact that Samsung doesn't force you to, this is portrait, live with it. It's like, take the photo. And if you don't like it, you can always go back to the regular shot.
Yeah.
You can tone up or down. It's what I loved about rich capture. Bear in mind, I despised Windows Phone. I hated it. But I would never leave without a Lumia 930.
Oh, yeah.
Ever. Just because of rich capture. There was just no way. There was nothing. It was a class of its own. And I love, like, I would be willing to use portrait mode now with the way Samsung has it, where I can choose.
Well, this is what I think is interesting, and I think to Samsung's credit, they've taken my least favorite dual camera implementation. Yes. They have fixed
I agree.
One of my biggest problems with it, though, which was image stabilization on the zoom sensor.
True.
So I don't know, did you play with any of the video while you were doing your hands-on? Because I was shooting like at full zoom, shooting just little handheld segments, and like it's surprisingly good for it being the less good sensor, right? So your image quality is never going to be as good.
And the aperture on that sensor is atrocious.
f2.4.
Well, but that's also, I mean, we're always going to have those problems with changing the focal length.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So it's never going to be your low light solution. You're always going to have issues there.
Yeah.
But
hopefully they don't pull an Apple where it doesn't even work at night.
You know what? I bet they will, though.
Dude, I was cracking
within
up
a certain range.
I was cracking up over the comparison that Samsung was doing in the presentation.
Yeah, because the good photo looked terrible.
No. It didn't really matter. They were like, this is what a telephoto photo from an iPhone looks at night, and this is the Galaxy. I'm like, the telephoto lens is not working at night. You guys, I'm like,
well, yeah. So
it doesn't work.
That's already funny, but it's also like their example of look at how much better ours is still like that looks like any crop zoom camera sensor.
I'll tell you this.
It looks rough.
I'm at least glad that they were bold enough to admit that this was the photo the phone took.
Yeah.
Whereas other companies will show you something that not even a 5D Mark IV can pull off.
Right.
You know. And
or remember when was it just after Microsoft bought out Nokia and they did that? Oh, image stabilization. And
my God.
It was just an example of image stabilization from a DSLR, not from a phone.
That advertisement from the Lumia 920 was so embarrassing.
Yeah, that was rough.
Thanks.
So embarrassing.
But one of the things that made me happy, and this is I'm totally in agreement with you here, is so they took my least favorite dual camera setup, but then they added the control from my favorite dual camera setup for the portrait, which is Huawei. So the way that you take the photo, and really the only reason why I am still going to give Huawei the edge here is because the way that Huawei does the bokeh slider loosely lines up with your actual camera apertures. Like it's not perfect, and again, it's software background blur, so it's all just post-processing. But the fact that they give you those little f-stops, this is like an f4, this is like an f2, and I want Samsung to give me just markers, so I know like how much blur did I put on this photo? Should I do less? Should I do more? And it's just a generic slider. I wish I had some note, like even if it was just a percentage, like full background to full blur, and you gave me like 20% or 30%, something like that, I think would be a lot more helpful. But that's again, it's to Samsung's credit that, especially in the United States, they're taking this feature from a player that no one really knows about. But Huawei and Leica, I still think they're ahead of the curve on how they're producing.
I do have to agree. I do have to agree
too, but I have not touched the camera on this phone because I was too focused on the S Pen, which I had to do for the video, and I also had to help you guys out too. So didn't get to actually touch about it.
You missed out. Camera's great.
I'm here at the events, and I'm just helping out.
I don't know. Going back to the topic of the Note, after it's funny how little I cared about devices like the Essential phone. Up until I actually, which is funny, I actually got this review unit as a funny story, which is I was not supposed to get a review unit, but I did. It
funny story.
It was the result of being at the right place at the right time and talking with the right people. But I didn't hold a B-Mix. Like whenever I had never experienced what it was like to actually hold a phone. Like in the case of the G6, it's the whole concept of larger screen over smaller frame.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Well, I mean, it is.
It's a taller display, and that plays with surface area, but you're not really. We've done the math.
Yeah,
we've done the math.
I mean, it is literally more surface area in a phone.
Whereas the Essential phone is like the true embodiment of a large display on a small phone, and them using titanium and ceramic to be able to make the phone sturdy enough to withstand the frame that's needed for this.
I don't know.
5.7 inches.
Oh, I see what you're saying, especially because of the top bezel sinking the.
And so there are literally.
You guys can't see on this crappy webcam. I don't know why I'm doing this for you.
Keep trying.
And so, I going back to the topic of the Note, I love the whole concept. Yes, you do need a large canvas on a Note phone if you want that to replace a notepad. It's just for me this is the future. Like. True no bezels, whereas we still have bezels to a certain degree with the Note, and obviously that's where Apple is pointing with the rumors of the iPhone 8.
Now, I mean, what's funny though is you instantly ran into the compromise of having no forehead bezel when we tried to do a phone call test.
Yeah,
and you still need. You mean we're fighting physics at some point where there's just
really
no room to put like a speaker.
It's not bad. It's like if it was a full tweeter, no woofer.
You know what? Because I don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, it's not. If it's not perfect, it's not worth it. Like I really get frustrated by those kinds of conversations. Like deal breaker. Like no, not really. You just need to know that could be a compromise of the platform.
You just need to know that it's no Motorola. It's not going to sound like an echoey chamber or anything.
But I think what's frustrating is throughout our tech career, I feel like every single one of these concerns has had a solution. So what if you had the vibration tissue conduction screen of a Kyocera?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to worry about whether or not you dedicated this space to.
Did that actually work though? Was that actually like?
Oh, the Brigadier was phenomenal.
I've never heard a phone call through bone conduction. Nor have I used the aftershocks. So I don't know bone conduction.
So because it was hit and miss. Because you might have.
We have issues. We have issues with fidelity. It's not going to be the highest quality audio experience, but the Brigadier was loud. Okay. And again, the whole point of that phone was like, you might be on a job construction site, moving heavy machinery. So you're mashing this phone up against the side of your face and it's sending audio through waves in the air and kind of jiggling the soft tissue of your face to help reinforce that audio. I thought it worked phenomenally well.
It's only one side of your face is thinner than the other side.
Until it's just forcing your brain over to the other side.
So I don't know. I mean, do you really think... And, the price tag, the legacy problems with the Note 7, and the rumors of the iPhone 8. I mean, if the iPhone 8 is truly what we've seen in photos, like we are talking about Essential phone on steroids. Like Essential phone has a bezel at the bottom and a weird camera loop at the top.
Yeah.
This is apparently zip. Like nothing.
4mm bezels.
Right.
Sure. Okay. No, I mean compared to the.
Hold on, I'm trying to do the math in like a fraction of a second. I'm like, no, never mind. But that's like the biggest question is obviously the Note is going to sell like hotcakes because
it's a Note.
It's a Note. But is it going to truly dent what Apple is doing, which is literally leapfrogging everything?
No, in fact, I really think that the Note is going to help reinforce what Apple's doing. One, just from the conversation of price points, that we can now escalate.
The price, yes.
We can escalate the price. Two, Apple will be that company, even though so many manufacturers are playing with different form factors, taller aspect ratios, higher resolution displays. When Apple does it, that'll validate those moves for a number of consumers.
And Apple's never first.
But I think Apple also has an opportunity to shake up the market in other ways. Not that we want to drift too much on this podcast, but the work they're doing with AR and VR, the AR kit developer stuff is crazy compelling. And it's not like Apple to be ahead of a technology like that.
That's one thing. And we also saw the rumors today of their 3D sensing camera. It's like, according to KGI, According to their evaluation, it seems that the technology that Apple has will take competitors at least 2 years to be able to mimic.
Namely Qualcomm. And that is mostly because they're waiting to see what Apple is, if Apple can be successful. And by that point, it'll take 2 years for them to actually ramp up.
Well, just think about it. I mean, how cool does this thing have to be able to replace Touch ID? I mean, Touch ID Touch ID was not the first fingerprint scanner.
And then to be the backbone of basically every future
what was the first fingerprint scanner? The HP 5450. Yes, that was the first fingerprint scanner. Then we got this Motorola, I think it was the Droid 2.
Well, there was an Atrix in there too.
But the Atrix didn't have a fingerprint scanner.
No, there was one Atrix that had it on the back.
Okay.
Of the top.
I think in any case, the one thing that is the big ask for any Apple consumer is to have to, wake up in the morning and put their phone to their face instead of, finding it and then actually, hitting the Touch ID button and then.
Yeah, I gave up on Iris Unlock on my S8 Plus just because I would rather have the phone unlocked as I'm holding it.
Really, because this is my behavior. The S8 Active is so flush. Yeah. So flush that my typical behavior every time that I unlock this phone is doing this.
Well, I see. I haven't had a chance to play with the Active,
like a toilet cleaner.
I have to look at it, and be like, oh, there it is. Okay. This is terrible. It's
Samsung's implementation of it is the worst
for the most part. Like everyone else
but especially you pick up a Mate 9, and as you're pulling this humongous phone out of your pocket, it's already unlocked.
Yeah,
you haven't held it up to your face. Same thing in G6. Again, is a perfect example of I want the phone screen unlocked and ready to use before my eyes have locked onto it. So I completely agree with your point for something like that. But what I think is going to be really compelling, though, is if this 3D sensing technology Apple's working on really does leapfrog Project Tango. And Apple becomes that first service where we're really starting to interact with reality, with data and services. Apple could then move forward on markets like the problems we have with automobiles in a really compelling way, because Google really hasn't moved the needle much on that kind of interaction. And companies like Samsung, I just don't think they've got the talent to drive the industry.
And I find that interesting that you don't need a special phone for that to work.
That sounds like
you don't need a Lenovo Fab 2 Pro.
No. That sounds like you're saying that they could eventually, at some point, do without the consumer. That they can serve all these people through these, the trickle down firms that you supply them the software, you supply them all the parts and they provide the services to, I don't think, Apple could always do first party hardware by, it sounds like that you can transition them into a role of being like a model, like a Microsoft Surface kind of.
Well, no, the reason why I think Apple is the compelling solution in this space is because they have the developer toolkit that people are really gravitating towards. If you don't have developers on board, then you don't have services, and it doesn't matter how fancy your camera array is or your sensors
or your Fab 2 Pro.
Or your Fab 2 Pro. I fired that thing up again. I mean, AR is fun, but man, I want to see
skateboarded on one.
On a Fab 2 Pro.
Yeah,
it's big enough. It's like the size of my foot.
I know.
True story. Totally a lie. It's not the same size as my foot. It's big, but it's not that big.
Bro,
it's bigger than your foot.
Bro. Man, oh man.
So I mean, let's kind of put a pin in Note 8 let's actually kind of just wrap up our thoughts. I'm totally with you. I think the biggest concern of the phone from a tech standpoint is slightly smaller battery than the S8 Plus. I do think that is going to be a lifestyle problem, but I feel like consumers, that's something that consumers complain about, and they never really seems to influence their purchasing decision. Like, so how many people in your circle of family and friends are like, oh, my iPhone just doesn't get the same battery life that it used to?
No.
Better keep buying iPhones.
Or that they actually
I need the newer one. No, it's just, these companies have, listen, marketing is probably one of the most important discoveries in human history.
Yeah. For influencing consumer
behavior. I think that I am not over exaggerating the importance of marketing in life. Like, it's insane how much buying decisions are determined. Sometimes it's not necessarily, I know a presidential candidate that won elections, not necessarily because of good publicity. It was just because there was so much buzz around the guy that he ended up winning.
Fifth Avenue's right over there. We could be like,
listen,
that's not going to happen.
Listen, think about how Samsung handled the launch of the S8. All of us had a phone. Like, they distributed the like, in the past, getting review units from Samsung was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Like, ever since after the Note 2, it's like remember, Note 2 was Galaxy S3.
S3 was, I think, my last good year with Samsung.
And so then afterwards, it's like the company became really stuck up. Like, they kind of still are, but they're not as bad. They're not as bad.
And they're licking their wounds.
But it was so difficult to get phones from them. It was so difficult to get, and we were an emerging channel. We were an emerging medium. It was difficult. And, we would completely get ignored. We would have to buy the phones and, do our jobs. But, in the case of the S8, they reached out to everybody. You wanted to say it? You wanted to say it? And so, obviously, the more you get people to talk about the phone, the more it becomes a modus. I don't know, modus is a Spanish word.
Yeah.
But it becomes like it's like going on a subway and noticing that everybody has an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so right now, what does everybody? It's funny. The first time that I met Saf, and we met up with a group of YouTubers. Everybody had an S7 Edge.
Yeah.
But we were just geeks. And now in the case of the S8. They want to create that appeal where everybody has an S8, and they achieved it to a certain degree.
Yeah, they did really well.
So you can't. It's very difficult for you to compete with the marketing machine, because what you're competing with is influence. And if you sit down with 10 of your friends, 2 of them, probably just 1, will have will make a decision on a phone based on an educated decision. Is this really the phone for me? Whereas the rest of the people, I can give you so many cases of products that I consume mainly because I watched TV commercials when I was a kid.
Totally.
Think about the popularity that Apple has today. It had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of these kids were using Apple IIs when they were children.
Well, and again, a marketing machine that's been affected since the early 80s.
Exactly. Yeah. We see that effect, and I've seen that effect in so many both products. I've even seen it in football teams like FC Barcelona.
Totally.
Like the result, FC Barcelona today is the result of something that started in 1989. It was a process that ended up becoming a culmination today. And so the same goes with marketing. These companies are extremely aggressive, not necessarily just in creating mind share from older consumers, but also in the younger crowd that will eventually become a consumer. Yeah. What are we? We cater to a very young crowd as much as we cater to a mid Generation X crowd.
Right.
And so the more we have the phone and we show off that we use the phone and et cetera, this is just a new way to reach consumers through BTL marketing, which is below the line. And going back to your question, is the Note 8, what will it's hard to say that Samsung is not going to succeed because their marketing power is insane.
Yeah.
Would I consider the Note 8 to be a great phone from an educated perspective? Okay.
It doesn't do it for you. I know it doesn't.
Okay, do it. Bear in mind. Okay, and listen, this is. I'll give you a little tip over. I'll give you a little tip over how I review phones. I am very pushy about review guides. Review guides for me are very important, or being part of keynotes.
Yeah.
Usually people ignore presentations whenever we're pre-briefed because we already saw the film, we already filmed everything we wanted, we just need to piece the video. But I like to be part of keynotes because I like to see what the promise behind the product is.
Yeah.
What are you trying to sell to me in that keynote?
Can you really deliver what?
And so the question is, do you really walk the talk?
Yeah.
And so does the Note 8 really replace the Notepad, and is it really a productivity tool for me? My answer would be that the Note 3 did a better job in that in particular. I'm not trying to subtract anything from the phone. It's a gorgeous display, amazing build quality. It's a great camera. Yeah. It didn't even need the secondary lens to be a great camera already.
No, it's still a good camera.
You know, it's an amazing phone on its own. Is it truly a productivity tool that will help you do more? You know, it's there. You can use some of these features, but will these really help you solve daily needs? Not necessarily, at least for me.
Right.
I know your user scenario is different, you know? So it really depends on the consumer.
So I think, and again, because again, I completely agree with you, except for the Note 3. The Note 4 was quite possibly the best phone
in both cases, they're half as good as the Note 8.
It's the Note 4 plus the Note 3.
Well, you cut the 8 in half.
Oh, that's no good.
It's actually a 3.
But this is also why I think Samsung is likely to see that dip over these next 2 fiscal quarters, where the Note can't dominate. I use this phrase, is the power of the Note waning? Because who is Samsung going up against at the end of this year?
Yeah.
But possibly the only company that really does give them a run for their money in terms of marketing.
Agree.
And probably the company that has done the best job of making their consumers lifestyle consumers, not geeky techie consumers, because that's dirty in general consumer land.
And if anything, they've done an amazing job in making geeky techie consumers enjoy the concept of lifestyle and the products they consume.
Totally. Oh, I mean, just like this last year of Apple advertisements has been phenomenal content. I keep pointing to the bicycle in the rain ad for the iPhone 7. Like, waterproofing, not a big deal. Lots of phones had water resistance ratings before the iPhone came out, and yet you watch that commercial, and you've got AC/DC pumping in the background, opening the garage doors, thunderstorms pouring down, and you're like, hells yes, that's rad. It doesn't even matter what the phone is. You're just lit up, and you've got your pulse rate going. So you've got that. Internationally, we've got a resurgent Huawei, again, coming out May 10. And what do we see from Google? But Google is starting to make their pivot into more consumer-oriented territory. So I don't think the Pixel 2 is really going to upset Note specifically.
No.
But this is the second year. If Pixel 2 proves to be a solid device, this is where consumers start paying attention to Google as a brand. Because Pixel had way more buzz than it really deserved.
Yes.
And it was because Google was finally talking directly to consumers, not making a developer phone. That's what the Nexus was. And what is the Nexus? Geeky techie, that's dirty. The Pixel, well, that's totally exactly the same kind of phone.
Which is hilarious.
A little bit prettier.
The Pixel is the ugliest Google phone ever made. Like, it is.
I don't know that it's the
Nexus 1 was far better looking than the Pixel.
I don't know. I don't like the Pixel, but I probably take it over a Nexus 5.
And by the way, like, so I get your point over the Pixel, and the Essential phone is probably the reason why I like using this phone most.
Yeah.
Is because it feels like a Pixel. It does not look like a Pixel.
Yeah.
So it fixes everything that I didn't like
about the Pixel.
You know?
Oh, except that camera.
Yeah.
That camera is a bummer.
Glare. Ring glare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, like the Pixel camera, even with the ring.
It was an okay camera, but you really got to sell it for
is a much better experience. That the Essential phone camera right now, it's so in need of a software update. But even shooting at the bar at night and then holding it right up next to an Honor and be like, how much easier it was to get a good. I mean, because I could get a good shot out of the Essential phone.
With patience.
With patience. Whereas like it was just like a couple like flip on my Honor, and it was like a much better phone.
Patience is a virtue. It's an essential need in life.
You know what? Life's too fast. Essential phone, that's your marketing campaign. Life's too fast. This camera, it's going to slow you down.
It's going to slow you down.
I think it's going to relax you.
We need one more speed bump in this, and I think that we've been comparing.
We need to wrap this
Galaxy Note 8 is not a stepping stone against other phones here. We're not talking about this against the Pixel 2 because we don't have it to compare with. Same thing for the iPhone 8. If you feel like that you want it now and you feel like that it has made the appeal to you, then you should do the appropriate course and save up and buy it, or just buy it outright if that's your mood. If you don't feel like it has convinced you at this point, and you've gone through the rest of 2017 without
buy a Note 4,
something to turn to, you can buy a Note 4.
Quite possibly the best phone ever.
Buy a mid-ranger or whatever, and you'll be much happier with your decision. I want to celebrate at least just the passing mention of Android Oreo. Not the bird.
So what you can't really see very well on this webcam, and for anyone who's listening, is Jules also went out of his way to get the mint Oreos. So it's an Android green. So officially, the name of the next generation of Android operating system is Oreo.
8.0.
It tastes very minty.
It is quite minty. There is a little bit kind of a toothpaste flavor to the mint.
That's part of it is the cream. It's not cream.
Yeah, that's the thing. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So folks, there you have it. Another rambling episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where our lovely guest this week, Jaime Rivera, is Jaime_Rivera on the Twitters. Jules is @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. Also now in Spanish, es.pocketnow.com, because we're basically everywhere. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your family and friends who love mobile technology, and by reviewing this podcast anywhere you can leave a podcast review. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, D-Brand. They're helping you protect your gadgets from scratches and drops, and they're helping us keep the lights on here at Pocketnow. But ultimately, there would not be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness from Eva. Oh, man, I'm going to be back on another airplane. So make sure you tune back in. That didn't work at all. Whatever.